husband and daughter returned earlier and tried to surprise me, but instead caught me W/neighbor. In the heart of our suburban enclave, life seemed picture perfect. Our home, with its manicured lawn and charming facade, was a symbol of stability and happiness. Inside, I was a devoted wife and mother, deeply involved in the day-to-day running of our household. My husband Mark was a hardworking and loving partner, and our daughter Emily was the light of our lives, brimming with the boundless energy and curiosity of a 5-year-old. However, beneath this veneer of domestic bliss lay a secret that would unravel our lives in the most unexpected way. Our neighbor Jack was a charismatic man in his early 40s. He had moved in a year ago, and his easygoing nature quickly made him a fixture in our community. Little did anyone know, including my own family, that my relationship with Jack would cross boundaries and lead to a moment of reckoning that none of us saw coming. Some afforded people don't respect people like us who are waitresses. They tend to treat us like garbage. They want us to bow down to them just because they have money and we are hustling for a better life and survival. When I got to Mark's table, I assisted them with what they needed. So when the event finished, Mark came to me at the counter and gave me the biggest tip. I was so happy because I was going to be able to provide for my grandmother and my 6-year-old little sister. A few weeks later, Mark came back again to the restaurant and gave me his business card. He told me to call him because he had an offer for me. I didn't understand what he was trying to say because I didn't know him and he didn't know me, so why would he come to my workplace and tell me that he has something to offer me? I felt offended, like he looked at me and felt pity and decided to make me a charity case. I didn't know what he wanted to offer me. My mind was running. I had thought maybe he wanted to kidnap me and sell me to the highest bidder. We no longer trust anyone nowadays. People just get missing every single day of our lives. So it wasn't easy to just trust him more, especially since he was a man of standards like him. He looked like those types of men who didn't settle for less, who loved those Barbie dolls who want to be ladies while I was just a simple and natural girl. Anyways, days later, I called the number that Mark had given me the last day we saw each other. To my surprise, it was answered by him. At first, I got tongue-tied. I regretted even calling because I didn't know what to say. I was really lost for words. Is this even normal and possible to just get lost for words when you have to speak? So as he was about to hang up, I decided to speak. I don't really remember what I had said, but I remember him asking to meet up with me. I hesitated at first, but I eventually gave in. 2 days later, we met and somehow we clicked. I had thought he was a man who was always serious and always talking about work. But with him, that wasn't the case. He was a very free-spirited person, and I enjoyed his company. We got a chance to get to know each other better on that day. He was actually not that type of arrogant guy because they have money. Mark was just a sweetheart, and his personality and the real Mark in general made me fall in love. Well, not really in love, but I developed a crush on him. My husband, Mark, male 47, and I, female, had been married for 10 years. Our relationship had its ups and downs, but we always managed to find our way back to each other. Recently, however, we had fallen into a routine that felt more like cohabitation than a partnership. Our conversations revolved around grocery lists, Emily's, our daughter's school activities, and the occasional financial discussion. The spark that once ignited our relationship had dimmed, and I felt increasingly disconnected from him. You know, I had once noticed something Mark while we were on our dating phase when someone bumped into his car. He got furious. He even changed color. He became red in an instant. He had once told me that the car he was driving was his favorite because it was a gift from his late father. So the guy who bumped into his car was arrogant, and he wasn't sorry for what he had done. Instead, he told him that the next time he should focus on where he was going and not stop the car everywhere. I saw that the other guy was kind of intoxicated, but Mark didn't care about all that. And another thing, the robot was red, meaning the wrong person was the other guy. Mark attacked the guy and started calling him names. I understood his anger and frustrations, but he was doing it too much. To say I got scared would be an understatement. I was terrified. I asked myself who was the person that I had fallen in love with. What he did was somehow, I don't know how I can explain this, but it made me have some sort of second thoughts about our relationship. One fateful day, I noticed that Mark was acting differently. He seemed distant, and his usual cheerful demeanor was nowhere to be found. I tried to talk to him about it, but he brushed her concerns aside, claiming it was just a bad day at work. At first, I didn't want to bother him or become a nuisance to him for always asking what was wrong with him up until. I saw that he was getting more and more distant and his behavior was not changing even one bit. So one day he had invited me to be his +1 at his works function. For some reasons, I agreed to be his +1. I mean, he was my man after all, and I didn't want to stay at home and be bored. So I said, why not? Such opportunities come once in a blue moon. My husband was not the kind of a guy that would randomly ask you to be his +1 in a formal function at his work. I would sometimes wonder who he was taking because he was not asking me. And the day he asked me to be his plus one was the first one. The weekend of the function came and I was super excited. Not because I was going to a function, but because my husband had thought of me for once and made me his plus one. Mark was an MD, managing director, at his workplace, which was why I had thought that maybe he was the boss when I first saw him hosting an event like this at the restaurant that I had been working at. Only to find out later that it was just a small and intimate event that his boss had asked him to host just to honor and appreciate his employees, especially those in the financial department. So the people that were there were everyone that worked at the company. Anyway, when we got to the function, I was mesmerized by the decor, the settings, and everything. It was just so amazing. I noticed that other staff members were welcoming and loving. Mind you, it was my first time going to my husband's workplace. I had never been there before, and I felt really important when Mark invited me to go with him to his work's function. He introduced me to his team members and other employees. Then at the end, he introduced me to his boss. His boss looked very young and charming. The gentleness in his was one of the things that made him look incredible. My relationship, or let me say marriage, with Mark was just everything. You know, the kind of love that you only see on TV shows or maybe Netflix movies and series? That was the kind of love that we had shared. I love the fact that he understood me and the fact that I do not like cooking, so most of the time, we would order in. Not that I didn't like cooking at all, because I would cook sometimes when I am in the mood, but it was not an everyday thing. So one chilled day, my husband and I were just chilling in our house talking about us and how far we have got. You know, Mark and I have been through so many challenges, and other challenges were too heavy to a point that we saw our relationship hanging over a cliff. But we won all of that and conquered. He told me that we should order in because he was craving for seafood that day and that I shouldn't cook, which was just music to my ears because I can say that I am a lazy bun, but when it comes to cooking only. So there was this neighbor who was working at a restaurant. Most of the time, if I am on a no-cooking mode, Mark and I used to call him and ask him to order for us, then he would deliver. Our neighbor was really a great help to us. While he was a manager at the restaurant, we treated each other as siblings from different parents. He was charming, down-to-earth, quiet, clean, and sophisticated. He was just handsome on another level. His name was James, and he was not really married, but had girls that helped him with his manhood needs. So that day, I had ordered his seafood from his favorite restaurant down the road. While I just decided to just order online at McDonald's, I just wanted their McFeast and ice cream. Mark's food got delivered first when I went to take a shower. Then after about an hour, my food came. I shouted for Mark, but he was not responding. Mind you, that time the bell was ringing. You know, I had no choice but to take a towel and cover myself so I could release the poor guy who is our neighbor. When I opened the door to accept my delivery, I would never get used to James's handsomeness. Some people, God really took his time creating the art of a human. I didn't know that there were such handsome and light caramel guys working at McDonald's. I had thought that maybe he was working in one of those luxury restaurants. I zoned out the same time as I opened the door and came face to face with such a god in human form. You know, those like Will Smith that do have to work too hard to keep their handsomeness. The poor man was just yummy and I couldn't help it. Yes, he was our neighbor, but it's okay to wash eyes right and appreciate what God had made. Funny enough, he made me feel wet in my panties. Since then, when I would order at McDonald's, I would be specific about the person that I want to be my delivery guy, who was our neighbor, or I would like to see a manager. I would even go to McDonald's and pretend to buy something just because I wanted to see that man. The way things, I would even fantasize about the poor guy, mind you. I had thought that he was taking me as a neighbor or a family friend. I would sometimes help myself a little down there while thinking about the guy and imagine him on top of me or having those sexual healing moments together. I kept doing that until Mark noticed and asked why I was helping myself while he was there. You know, I just ignored him and continued with what I was doing. I know that I shouldn't have been a psycho over our neighbor, but I couldn't help it, you know. Days passed, and you know I was happily married to my husband, and we had been together for many years, and the S** was good. However, I had always been a bit curious about the world beyond our town, you know. I wanted to know how it was to do some things outside our marriage. And the handsome neighbor guy was always on my mind. That time my husband had started focusing more on his business work than in our marriage. He was not always home. He would go on business trips for like a week, and I got bored, so I started exploring what I had been missing in my marriage with Michael. Another thing, I was not in my moods because whenever I would order or go to McDonald's, I wouldn't see the delivery guy. At that point, I didn't even know his name. So I ordered at McDonald's again while I was busy scrolling through my phone. That time it was hot, so I was wearing a very revealing short that showed my bums a little and a sports bra. I was just not caring about anything in the world. I had even forgotten about the delivery guy. I went to accept my order while busy going through my phone. The way I was so clued on my phone, I didn't even look up to see who was delivering my order. I heard him greeting me. That was when I took my attention off the phone to see if my ears were not deceiving me. When I looked up, I saw him. He was right in front of me. The delivery guy was at my doorstep. You know how girls act when they see their crush? Well, that was what happened to me. I just felt the need to tell him to come in and offered him something to drink. Of course, I had invited him in. I know I shouldn't have done that because the guy was on duty, but the girl couldn't help it. I tried making small talk because it was really awkward, so during the silent moment, I ended up confessing my crush to him. I bluntly told him that I had a huge intimate crush for him and I would sometimes fantasize about him. When I saw that I was talking too much, I decided to ask his forename because when we moved to our house, he was the one who welcomed us in the neighborhood and introduced himself as his name only. So I asked him to come back on his day off, but he had to first contact me to make sure that I am around. But for that, you know when you get the urge to just do something yet you are kind of scared, but you know that you have to do it for your peace. I put my fears aside and asked to kiss the poor guy. I then kissed him before he even protested. I know it was very wrong and evil of me because I was married, but I couldn't help it. His lips looked appetizing. I loved my husband dearly, but I just felt unappreciated and misunderstood in our marriage. As the years went by, he seemed to give me less and less attention. I started to wonder if I made the right decision marrying him. Every year I thought he was going to change. We were emotionally distant while in the same place. He didn't look at me the same way he usually did. I tried to even change the way I looked, went to the gym, and even bought myself some new clothes so he could notice me. I would sometimes ask myself if he didn't find me attractive anymore, or maybe he had found someone else better than me. But why not divorce me or tell me straight in the face that you have lost attraction or you no longer feel me anymore, because stringing a person along while you know that you no longer feel them or love them anymore hurts more than receiving divorce papers or breakups and not getting any explanation for the separation. I don't know if you understand what I mean. Please help me understand why men do this to us but get angry when we do it to them. The only time Mark would be available was on weekends, but he was no longer spending much time with me. Most of the time when Mark is available, he would spend it. The only person who was able to give me his time was James, male 29, fake name, our neighbor, who we would sometimes make him the delivery guy. Since the day I kissed him, the following day he came back to my house, which was a surprise to me because I had not ordered anything but the moment I opened the door. He attacked me with a mind-blowing kiss, which led to a very heated sexual healing session. Since then, we have been seeing each other behind Mark's back. And yes, we would meet at my house whenever Mark was not around. You know when you are married to someone who is always busy, to even give you attention for a minute or notice and appreciate everything you do is hard. Sometimes you ask yourself why you get married or how it would have been if you didn't get married, not to your husband only, but how it would have been if you were not married at all. I just don't understand people who change after they get married. I mean, my husband, or must I say my ex-husband, was giving me so much love and attention before we got married. But after like a year into our marriage, he changed to be someone that I don't even know. It's more like I got a false advertisement of him. James, on the other hand, represented a breath of fresh air. His spontaneous, adventurous spirit was a stark contrast to the predictability of my daily life. We initially bonded over shared interests, gardening, and our mutual love for classic literature. These casual conversations evolved into longer, deeper dialogues. We found ourselves gravitating toward each other, sharing thoughts and feelings. The affair began innocuously enough. It started with an innocent coffee invitation at James's place. Mark was out of town on a business trip and Emily was at school. James and I sat in his sunlit kitchen discussing everything from Shakespeare to the struggles of modern parenting. That day, I felt a connection with James that I hadn't felt with anyone in a long time. The conversation flowed effortlessly, and for a moment I forgot about the responsibilities and frustrations waiting for me at home. Over the following weeks, our encounters became more frequent. What began as friendly chats turned into stolen glances and subtle touches. The day our relationship turned physical was both exhilarating and terrifying. I knew the risks, yet I couldn't resist the allure of the passion and intimacy that James offered. It was as if I had been sleepwalking through my life, and James had awakened me. Internally, I was conflicted. The guilt of betraying Mark gnawed at me, yet I found solace in the moments I spent with James. I justified my actions by convincing myself that I deserved happiness, even if it was fleeting and wrapped in deceit. So there was this day, as I was at home, I was chatting with James. He became a very good distraction. He made me feel so much at peace, like I was loved and noticed. While my husband would shower me with romantic dinners, flowers, and all those materialistic things that I didn't really need. Even our intimate moments were no longer nice because it felt like he was being romantic because he thought it made me happy, but it was not. All I wanted was to be seen, be free, and be appreciated, and that was what James was giving me, the attention. As time went on, I found myself drawn to James's youthful energy and zest for life. I began to feel a connection with him that I hadn't felt in a long time. However, I knew that I was married and committed to Mark. But James and I were spending more time together, exploring new ventures. It was fun. I got to be free and be me again. Yes, I needed a friend to pass time with, but I felt something for James. Despite my initial intentions to keep things platonic, my feelings for James grew stronger each day. He knew his game, and it was on top of this world. The guy was not only gifted in his handsomeness, but in bedroom business too. James and I would communicate through Discord because I didn't want my husband finding out about my abomination, so Discord was the only best option. You know, Mark and I had made our social media linked to each other's gadgets so we would know who we were talking to, and for our own safety, or maybe mine, because I would sometimes get messages from unknown numbers. They were not sending unpleasant messages, so I told Mark about it, and luckily he had a friend who is a cybersecurity professional who he would ask to find out who was the trespasser. Sometimes I would find myself daydreaming about him and eagerly awaiting our conversations in Discord. I would daydream about the moments that we would have together. They were always magical. James knew how to make a girl go crazy and beg for more of his sexual healing. James was a beast in bed, and it wasn't easy to get him off my mind. He was doing everything that my husband was failing to do. I mean, my husband was still in his early 30s, but the way he was acting, one would think that he had reached his menopause and maybe in his mid-50s. About a week later, my husband had been home a lot lately, and it really surprised me because I even forgot when was the last time I had seen him around the house. The worst part not being locked up in his office, working or playing with Emily. As much as it was supposed to make me happy, but I was not, especially for the sudden change of heart. He would still tell me that he loved me, but I didn't, and I couldn't believe it anymore. I mean, there were a lot of loopholes in his act, and it was really alarming. One would think we were so much in love and would look like the perfect couple ever. But I knew my husband, and he was hiding something from me, and I had to try and find out what he was really hiding. That time it was really hard for me to get time with James because our affair was a secret. I should have thought that maybe my husband was suspecting something about me, but it didn't even come to mind that maybe he wanted to plant a camera in our house. After some time, my husband's behavior went back to square one. The only difference would be that he was spending more time in his home office working on his laptop. Little did I know that he was actually watching everything that the cameras had caught. James and I continued seeing each other at my marital home or his house. I know it was careless of me, of us, but I was just too lazy to even go to shop, so how would I have traveled to the hotel or B&B? James would come to my house as if he was delivering something to destroy people and gossip mongers that we call neighbors. Our thing would last for like an hour or less. It would depend on the foreplay that James liked doing. He loved exploring my body, and I was enjoying it so much. It was a crisp autumn day when the fateful surprise was set in motion. Mark had planned to take Emily to visit his parents for the weekend, giving me some much-needed alone time. Unbeknownst to me, they decided to return a day early to surprise me. They wanted to share the joy of their trip and shower me with unexpected love and attention. On that same day, James and I had planned to spend the afternoon together. We were to meet at my house, a risky move, but one that we both deemed worth the thrill. The house was quiet and empty, the perfect setting for our rendezvous. So I was chilling with James after we had our lovemaking session. James was a very good person, smart, business-minded, and knew what he wanted. He had dreams, but because of his home situation, he started up working at McDonald's to make ends meet, then got promoted to be the manager. After we were done chilling, we continued where we had left off. James would make me scream and beg like a little kid hyping his school crush on a sports day. The way we were so caught up in the moment, we didn't even hear the door opening. You know, when you are just too deep in your moment, you sometimes don't even hear the glass breaking. Or maybe it is ignorance, right? I don't know what really happens when you are really focusing on something or deeply in the mood of a certain moment. It's like your mind and sense of hearing no longer work properly, especially the ears. They just get closed, and that is how Mike caught me and our neighbor James in action. You should have seen his face. Oh my God, even today it still haunts me to a point that I would even hate the moments that I had with Milo. Mark was in a mix of anger, disappointment, and hurt. The mind started getting its sense back when he was standing right before me, well before my face. That time I was under James while he was on top, and James didn't seem to notice him because he was too deep in it. When I opened my eyes, I was met by my husband's stiff face sitting on the glass coffee table that stays in the sitting room, and my daughter is standing at the doorway. Mind you, that time James and I were making out on the couches. I pushed James aside. He tried protesting, but I just spoke to my husband and asked him what he was doing at home early in the afternoon. That was when he saw that we were not alone. James started apologizing to Mark, of which Mark didn't care about because his eyes were glued on me. It was like he was searching through my soul, and it wasn't comfortable. His look was even scary, to say the least. James saw his opportunity to just pick up his clothes and go. That time James was wearing work clothes, so Mark had seen that he was working at McDonald's. I tried reasoning with my husband and apologized, but honestly, I didn't even know what I was apologizing for because I had been caught red-handed, cheating with our neighbor who Mark took as part of the family, as he looked like he was a family guy. The moment they walked in was surreal. Mark and Emily, armed with balloons and a bouquet of flowers, pushed open the front door, their faces alight with anticipation. The sight that greeted them was one they were entirely unprepared for. James and I were in the living room, caught in an embrace that left no room for misinterpretation. The look of horror and disbelief on Mark's face was something I will never forget. Emily, too young to fully grasp the situation, looked confused and frightened. Time seemed to stand still as the gravity of the moment sank in. Mark's voice, usually so steady and calm, trembled with a mixture of rage and pain. "What is going on here?" he demanded, his eyes darting between James and me. Emily clung to his leg, sensing the tension but not understanding its cause. My heart pounded in my chest as I struggled to find the right words. The reality of the situation hit me like a tidal wave, and I felt a deep sense of shame and regret. James, too, seemed lost for words, his confident demeanor crumbling under the weight of the confrontation. The fallout from that moment was immediate and devastating. Mark, his face contorted with anger and betrayal, ordered James to leave because he stopped him when he wanted to go. The door slammed shut behind him, the sound echoing through the house like a gunshot. Emily began to cry, her small frame shaking with fear and confusion. Mark and I stood facing each other, the chasm between us widening with each passing second. "How could you do this to us?" he asked, his voice breaking. To Emily, I had no answer, no justification that could make sense of the pain I had caused. All I could do was apologize, my words sounding hollow even to my own ears. Mark retreated to our bedroom, slamming the door behind him. Emily followed, her cries muffled by the thick walls. That night was one of the longest of my life. I slept on the couch, the silence of the house pressing down on me like a suffocating blanket. My mind raced, replaying the events over and over. I knew that the road to redemption, if there was one, would be long and arduous. The days that followed were a blur of tears, arguments, and awkward silences. Mark and I could barely look at each other. The trust that had once been the foundation of our relationship shattered. Emily, sensing the tension, became withdrawn and quiet. The guilt I felt was overwhelming, but I knew that I had to try and make things right. I had jeopardized the only thing that was going well in my life. I was just a housewife, and my husband was taking care of everything. But what did I do to thank him? I showed him the most humiliating and disrespectful way of showing appreciation. After some time, he came down and found me still in the same spot. He told me to prepare for the following day since I knew that it was Thanksgiving and the families were coming over. He told me to put on my best act when the family gets here and we would discuss the disgusting that he had found in his house after Thanksgiving. Have you heard or experienced that whenever you would wake up early in the morning because it is your favorite holiday? So you would be happy and thinking about how the day would go, even though you knew that there were underlying issues that you and your husband need to talk about. But you have to put on your best happy smile. It's your favorite holiday. You have to be happy, enjoy, and be merry despite the tension that was in the house. So during Thanksgiving, we would host our family to celebrate with us. It had always been my duty to do the cooking and everything, plus that time, the house was full. The whole family had come to celebrate with us. So as we were all chilling and laughing, sharing a lot about our pasts, it was a happy moment until my husband asked the kids, siblings' kids, to go play in another room because he wanted to talk with the adults. I knew that there was something deep and serious he wanted to talk about. I hoped and prayed that it was not what I had thought it was. I was crossing my fingers. I was hoping that he was not going to drop a bomb and tell us that maybe he was getting a new wife, or he wanted to introduce a child that he had made when he cheated. Didn't even think about my issue because I had clouded it and focused on the happy moment only for it to be cut short. Mark had some days where he was acting so strange and weird, so my mind just jumped to the far end of the actual issue. But the meeting was actually about me, which came out as a very huge bomb. A bazooka, that was what my husband had dropped. He told the family that he had something to show them. Not me hoping that he was going to show us our wedding videos, just like he would always do when the family is gathered. But instead, he inserted a USB on a TV and asked everyone to enjoy the film. Imagine the nerve of embarrassing your wife like that in front of the whole family. As I was still in that depressing state of being divorced, I received a call from James telling me that he had lost his job and my husband had attacked him. He was in hospital. I didn't know what to do, and to tell the truth, I didn't even care because I wanted my husband back with me. I knew that I had to start my life from the ground up, but it wasn't going to be easy because I was not as business-minded as my husband and I didn't know where to start fixing everything. But the only important thing I needed back was my husband. The treatment even at home had changed to a point that my father didn't speak to me for 3 straight weeks then when he got his voice back. He told me to pack my *T and leave his house because I was a bad example to my sisters and their female kids. That time I didn't even know where to go and who to call during my time of need. I ended up going to my Nana's house. Yes, she was also disappointed when she heard what I had done, but she opened her warm and welcoming arms and comforted me. Time passed, I got a call from Mark asking to meet up. So a few days later, we decided to seek professional help, turning to a therapist for us and our daughter, especially for Emily to navigate the wreckage of our relationship. The sessions were painful and raw when Mark joined one day, forcing us to confront the deep-seated issues that had led to the affair. Mark expressed his hurt and anger while I tried to explain my actions without sounding like I was making excuses. The therapist helped us to see that while the affair was a symptom of our problems, it was not the root cause. We had both contributed to the distance that had grown between us, and it would take both of us to bridge that gap. It was a slow process, filled with setbacks and moments of doubt. Emily's well-being became our primary focus. We worked together to ensure that she felt loved and secure, despite the turmoil in our marriage. Family therapy sessions helped her to understand that none of this was her fault, and that both her parents loved her deeply. Mark and I were no longer together at that time, but we were co-parenting. I am happy with how things are, even though it has cost me my united family.